Well, the key to having a really great experience at the show is in pre-planning. You can't just buy the booth and put the machinery in it and then show up and hope that it's going to work out. The exhibitors that get the best results are planning months ahead of time. They're scheduling visits with their existing customers and especially their prospects. So they're working and arranging meetings, they're arranging dinners. They've got an idea of who they're going to see, or at least the key visitors that they want to see before the show ever opens.
Welcome to Sole Source, the podcast specifically for manufacturers and contractors who are tired of leaving money on the table and instead ready to become the only call their clients ever make when they have a new project. I'm Matthew Neuberger, and each episode we're going to sit down with actual contractors and manufacturers that have figured out how to escape the bid trap and instead sell completely on value and build the business that they envisioned instead of one that drains them. So if you're ready to actually start filling your backlog with the types of clients you love and want to work with and make your team happy, you're in the right place. Let's get into it. All right, everybody. Well, welcome to our special show here. I'm here with Glen Long. This is Matthew Neuberger. Glen, thank you for joining the show. Appreciate it.
Matt, thanks for having me.
Of course. We're going to talk today about being successful at PACK EXPO and some key things you need to know. And it's really nice to, Glen, have you here because you really serve in two capacities in this discussion, which is one, your role at PMMI, and of course, you've been an exhibitor at many PACK Expos over the years. So why don't you give everybody a quick background on who you are for those who already don't know who you are?
Okay, well, I'm Glen Long. I'm PMMI Senior Vice President, so that's my role as an association person. But prior to coming to PMMI, I was in the industry. So my whole career has been in the packaging machinery business, everything from vertical form fill seal machinery to cup fillers and cartoning machinery, even inspection machinery. So mostly roles in general management, president, CEO, but I started in sales and marketing. So trade shows, and in particular PACK EXPO, were a really big part of our world.
So that's the background you're getting, folks. But in addition to that, Glen and I have worked on creating two different two-day live in-person training workshops. One is on professional selling specifically for the industry, and the other one is on trade show selling. And those are things you can look up through PMMI's website. But this is also a precursor to a free for PMMI members webinar that takes place in October. We'll provide you all the information for that webinar. But that webinar is called Ready When the Doors Open, the Manager's Playbook for PACK EXPO. And today we're going to talk about some of the things that I'm going to cover in a lot more detail in the webinar in October. So this is all really to get you ready to get the most out of PACK EXPO. And there are some key things, some insights we want to share with you today that could be very helpful for you as whether you're an owner, whether you're a manager of a team, or whether you're a team member attending PACK EXPO in whatever capacity, marketing, you're an engineer, you're in business development, should be very, very helpful for you. So with that in mind, Glen, you've seen your fair share of booths in the industry over the years, both standing behind the table and obviously seeing all of the members and exhibiting. We have a lot of members this year, right? I think you guys keep breaking records with the number of attendees in the show. If we're talking about people that attend the show, every year it seems like we're breaking a new record. So I think the point I'm trying to make is your buyers are at this show. Your customers are at this show. Your partners are at this show. This is such an important few days that you get to spend where literally everybody in your world will be there. And if they're not, they wish they were. I'm just curious, is when you walk by a booth, think back over the last couple of years, when you walk by a booth, what tells you in about 10 seconds whether that team is going to have a good week or maybe just a bunch of names that they're not going to know what to do with?
Well, I wish it were that simple, but surely as you walk the aisle, you take a look into a booth and you can really tell. You'd be surprised what people will do that gives an impression of not being ready or gives the wrong impression. Innocuous things that people are doing in the booth that they really don't think anything about, but it makes it appear as though you're not inviting or you're not ready to receive your visitors. But behind the scenes, there's so many things that people don't think about or don't do that can make a difference between them having a really good show and not.
And do you see that more in the planning, or do you see it sort of, can you tell if somebody's planned out well in the show when you walk by? Can you say, oh, these guys definitely have their act together and I can see because of this?
No, I mean, I think surely some booths differentiate themselves from others because they look very nicely done. They're professionally organized. They're clean. They're well laid out. They're not crowded. People are not sitting around and, I almost said smoking and drinking, but, people don't smoke anymore. But back in the day, they did. Eating, you'd be surprised at the things that they do that would put off these visitors. I would say you really can't tell. Even some of the really good looking exhibits, the staff is not prepared as well as they could or should be.
And so tell me about kind of going into the show, a lot of what happens at the show is sort of, and what you see in that walking by the booth is dictated by what the company wants to accomplish, by what the exhibitor is hoping to accomplish. You've been an exhibitor. Talk to me about how you sort of thought about how do we define success? And I'm sort of thinking along the lines of, you know, did you ever look at your show cost and then evaluate that against something like number of leads we generated? Did you look
Sure,
at
sure.
badge scans? What was it? What was the number? And what did it change about how you ran your booth as an exhibitor?
Well, the key to having a really great experience at the show is in pre-planning. You can't just buy the booth and put the machinery in it and then show up and hope that it's going to work out. The exhibitors that get the best results are planning months ahead of time. They're scheduling visits with their existing customers and especially their prospects. So they're working and arranging meetings. They're arranging dinners. They've got an idea of who they're going to see, or at least the key visitors that they want to see before the show ever opens. But for a lot of our members and for a lot of exhibitors, this is the single biggest marketing spend in the calendar year for them. And you'd be surprised how many people spend huge amounts of money and then show up and wait for the doors to open and hope for the best. So we were sitting around one time. Somebody said, or in some of the pre-work for the call, you and I were talking about, well, yeah, the cost for the booth is expensive. And early on in my career, that was, in sales and marketing, that's what we worried about. That's what we had to, it's so many dollars to take so many square feet for the booth and then for the exhibit, the display and so forth. But when you really start sitting around as a business owner or whoever's responsible for that P&L, you look at what it really cost you to be at the show, the amount of money you spent for the booth for sure, but the amount of money you spent in trucking, maybe multiple loads of equipment to the show, the drayage and, cost to get it in there and get it out. The cost for your staff to be there, sometimes many numbers of staff, 20, 30, of your own staff in a booth or more, the cost it takes to house them and feed them, the entertainment costs if you're entertaining customers. You
Yep.
start to look at all of that. And we had the bright idea one time, hey, we ought to take the number of leads we got and divide that into the cost that actually, we incurred to be here. And the number was shocking. The actual cost per lead is thousands and thousands of dollars, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars. So when you look at that, and it really forces your sales team to maybe take those leads a little bit more seriously. But in terms of success, I'm surprised at the number of exhibitors that will say, we measure our success by the number of leads we got. Well, for us, that always meant people were running around and their first question was, can I scan your badge?
Yeah.
You'd end up with, sure, that drove our numbers up. I've even seen exhibitors have booth personnel stand at the edge of the booth as people are walking by in the aisle with the handheld scanners going, can I scan your badge? Well,
Huh.
you get garbage that way. I mean, yeah, your
Right.
number of leads is high or higher, but that doesn't mean that they're qualified leads or they have any interest in what you're providing at all. So I really think that the success, I mean, surely if you're selling something off the floor, that always counted as a success, and that did happen from time to time. But the real success is how many worthwhile visits or appointments did you schedule as a result of those leads at the show? How many of those leads answered your phone call or answered your follow-up and said, hey, let's meet, or when can you come by? That was successful. That meant that you were generating the business that you wanted to generate from the show, especially if they were people that you had not already had in your database before the trade show started.
I want to go back to the lead thing for a second because you pointed out this and you said a lot of people were scanning badges and just getting this huge volume of scanned badges. And I'm kind of curious when you look at how to define a lead, how would you define a lead as opposed
Well,
to what somebody else might call a lead as a badge scan?
yeah, I mean, I always say there are a couple different kinds of visitors when they come into the booth. You might have existing customers. They really don't have any buying intent at the moment. They're coming either just to maintain a contact with you. Sometimes we had customers that would come in that would have a service issue, and you'd be surprised how many times that happens. And you'd say, well, did you contact us for support? Well, no. Well, it's hard for us to know you're having a problem if you're not telling us. So we
Right.
had different categories. Again, a lot of them were just simple follow-up. They really had no urgent need or imminent need. They just wanted to make contact with you. So we would categorize them by, simple follow-up or contact, but ones that had active projects or that were clearly seeking some type of contact post-show for follow-up, those were leads. And we would even categorize those based on urgency, because in some cases we'd have so many that it took some time for the salespeople to be able to get to all of them. We'd send something out immediately, but to make meaningful contact, we did try to prioritize them in our post-show meetings, which we did every evening as the show closed or in the morning before the show opened for the day before.
Interesting. So meaningful contact. And you defined a couple of things there that I want to make sure that the people that are listening to this get, which is for you, a lead, it sounds like they had to have a project. There had to be something they were looking to accomplish that they shared with you. There had to be some sort of a timeline of meaningful contact to follow up with them, or book something there at the exhibit or the booth with that person to take a next step.
Right, right. And a lot of times you can customize your lead capture forms. So we would customize those in some cases even with our own product. So we could be certain which of the product line the contact was interested in. But there would be ways that we could categorize the follow up in terms of timeline. A lot of times people had projects, but they weren't imminent. So the urgency to try to arrange a meeting might not be as great as someone that says, hey, we have a funded project and we're looking to narrow down these parts of our line and we're looking for a filler or a capper. Those were urgent and properly qualified leads from the show floor.
So properly qualified lead defined as, I'm just reflecting back, there's a project, there's a budget, and there's a timeline.
Exactly.
Then it's a lead. So if everyone listening to this, doesn't matter who you are in terms of a business development person or the owner of the business is standing there, that could be a good definition to avoid getting a bunch of names that you then get back to the office and don't know what to do with.
Sure. Any contact, any legitimate contact is good to have. Anybody, meaning anybody that makes a product that has, a use for your particular piece of equipment, even if they don't have an imminent buying need, that's a good contact, especially for a territory salesperson. They want that in their database so that they know that person is there, so that they can, maintain some type of contact. So when a project does come up, then they think of you, or you have at least an opportunity to turn that contact into a lead. But there were varying degrees, like you said. If there was an imminent need and there was a timeline and a budget, then that made it more urgent, and we would categorize those different levels from different places I've been as to how they were followed up.
Okay, perfect. So I want to take that in the second part of what you said. I want to ask you some questions about what you said earlier about everybody sort of likes the new face, and we're trying to generate leads and get people to come to the booth. But you also mentioned that the client comes by your booth, and sometimes it's a service issue that they didn't tell you about. But a lot of people, I would say a lot of customers are coming into your booth, and they could also be a sales opportunity. And so I'm kind of curious, when it comes to senior players being in the booth for the whole show versus like the busy days, and what is the strategy for taking care of customers who are already buying from you? Because we can get so overly focused on getting the new piece of business from a new customer. That's really flashy and exciting. But as we all know, normally if you have a customer, it's more likely that an existing customer is going to do more business with you before a new customer will.
Sure.
So what are your thoughts on ownership or senior leadership being in the booth, when they're in the booth, and what's the strategy for customers?
We always made sure that we had different staff in the booth. They don't always just want to talk to the salespeople. So we always had technical engineering people in the booth for support. A lot of times visitors would come in with much more technical questions, and it was always nice to have that support. We always made sure we had service management in the booth so that we could talk to existing customers if they were having a problem and we needed to talk to them about the issue and maybe schedule a follow-on service visit. We had those people in the booth. But we also had our senior management team in the booth. And a lot of time, especially existing customers, they like to maintain contact and they don't ever get the opportunity to meet some of those senior people. So it's always nice to have them there just to maintain that relationship. But it's also nice to have senior people in the booth. If you're having a meeting, especially if it's been prearranged and you have a buying team, so you have a group of people from a customer, a prospect that are in your booth and they want to have a proper sit down meeting, it's always nice to have a senior person in the conversation. It makes the customer feel, I think, a little bit more appreciated, or feel like you're paying a larger degree of attention to them.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on the meeting, and not all customers are the same, but I certainly had customers where they felt like that was something special if those people were available in the booth for them to meet or talk to.
They're kind of celebrities, right?
Sure. Yeah, especially for some of our big members, it's a big thing for them to make the trip. A lot of them are coming from overseas, and it's nice that they make the effort, and a lot of their customers are interested in seeing them.
I'm kind of curious on your thoughts. One of the things that big fancy consulting firms do a lot is something called a voice of the customer study, right? What does our customer actually want and need, and what do they care about, and what do they think of us, and all these different questions. What do you think a leader should be prepared to ask? Again, a lot of times when a customer walks in the booth, it's treated like a social visit. Hey, Glenn, thanks for coming by. I really appreciate you guys doing business with us. How's everything going? How's my team taking care of you? Those are the types of questions I would imagine normally happen. But if a senior leader is going to be in the booth, what should they plan to gather in terms of information? What should they plan to give in terms of their time and efforts to customers walking in the booth?
Well, I think it varies based on the size of the company. I mean, some of our members are smaller, so the senior leader is wearing lots of hats and may indeed also be the chief salesperson. So
Right.
what you're expecting from that person might be completely different than one of our, multinational large members where the executives are traveling from a great distance and are not normally so closely aligned with the sales process.
Layers
But
between, yeah.
yeah, I think as a senior leader, it's a really good opportunity for you to be able to ask both existing customers and prospects, what's going on in the industry, what are they seeing, especially for trends. If they're an existing customer, what do they think about the equipment that they have, and are they satisfied with it? And what would they like to see as, especially from a development standpoint? We would always get good feedback at the shows from customers about things they would like to see, and that's what made it helpful to have the management team and the engineering team in the booth, because a lot of times your existing customers, you're getting buying teams from them that you don't always get to see. You may have a contact or two, but when they bring these teams to the show, you're now meeting people in the organization that you don't normally get to see, and they have some pretty vocal opinions about things they would like to see on the equipment that it doesn't have, or features or things that they would look for, even if they aren't in the buying cycle immediately.
Interesting. We have an acronym for this, and I'm wondering if this would be helpful. You made a point that I want to make sure people watching this don't miss, which is you're not asking about how are we doing. Sometimes we're afraid to ask that question, especially if maybe some things have gone wrong. We're asking about what they want in the future. Another point that was subtly made was we also have to know what's going to be in their future, whether they know it or not, and
Right.
prompt those things, right? The world is constantly changing. Regulations are constantly changing. You can name so many things that are changing that are going to impact the buyers coming to the show. You need to know those coming in and ask about that. We have a acronym we use called Recon, which is let's talk about the results we're providing for you as a customer. Let's talk about the opportunities you see in the future. Let's talk about some of the changes or challenges that we see on the horizon, but we want to know what you see. Where do we see the opportunities to take advantage of those, or to take corrective action? And what are the next steps we should be taking together? So we
Right.
call that Recon, which is results, experience, changes, opportunities, next actions. Would that fit? Is that something like a senior leader could then kind of take?
Absolutely. One of the best examples of that right now is all the things that have to do with extended producer responsibility, EPR, and recycling and composting and so forth. A lot of the end user customers have installed bases of machines, and there's so much going on in the world of materials and so much going on with the customer base in terms of trying to lightweight the packages or switch to more sustainable materials. And that causes all kinds of problems for the machinery, especially for the older machinery. So, we're always trying to gather information on what the customers are thinking and where they think they're going in the future, because we have to be able to adapt to that. So it has a tremendous influence on new product development, but it also has a lot to do with machines that we're trying to keep serviceable in the field. So the show is a great place for intelligence gathering, for keeping abreast of what's going on in the industry, and literally talking to your customers face to face.
So knowing those things and talking about those is really caring about the customer and understanding what challenges they're going to face, and then collaboratively coming up with solutions or ideas or next steps. But we had talked offline a little bit about this. What's your thoughts on, especially the bigger organizations where the owner isn't the chief cook and bottle washer, but may have other commitments? Do you recommend they sort of show up for the first couple days of the show, or stay for the whole thing? And just your thoughts on that.
Well, ideally, it would be great if we get, you get your leadership to stay. I think a lot of people have a tendency to skip the last day. It's generally lighter in attendance, but I know a lot of exhibitors would tell you many times teams with buying intent will come on the last day because they know you're not as busy and it's a quieter time to get more of your attention or to have a more significant meeting. So it depends. I mean, again, some of our really large members, that senior leader may have many commitments. It's very difficult for them to be able just to come to the show for the whole time. So it varies. It's nice if they're there. Sometimes we'd split it up. Our leadership team couldn't always be there the whole time, so we'd make sure that somebody had the first half of the show and somebody had the second half of the show. So there was always someone in the booth to help with whatever was coming up.
And what I might add to that is, if the team is scheduling, in the beginning of the call, we talked a little bit about scheduling appointments in the booth. Schedule the appointments for the slow days, right? That way, if leadership is there and they stay, or they split up their time, and you schedule key clients or key new relationships to meet, those days are good for that. So there's activity in the booth. And of course, like you said, serious buyers show up on that day because you're less busy. So it's sort of a dual purpose. There's this other problem, or challenge, I should say, that happens at trade shows that you and I've talked about, which is you're on the booth, and on the busy days, you're having a lot of conversations. And it's easy for those conversations to happen with the wrong person.
Yeah,
because the
without
person they need to is busy.
right.
You've talked about the types of people that show up in the booth. We kind of joke. You have your existing clients, you have brand new opportunity clients, you have people that are interested, but it's a project that's far off and they're not even sure. And you have trick or treaters who are just looking for I just need the pens and the stress balls that are in the back there, right? We have all those people, but in the busy days, you're sorting through all of that, and the chances are that if you've got multiple people from your team in that booth,
Yep.
someone on your team's having a conversation with someone you need to be talking to instead of them. So how do you sort through all that? Do you have any sort of ideas for how to handle that?
And those are the two biggest mistakes that I see happen. The first one is that you can't greet every visitor. And if you're a regional salesperson, you can absolutely be certain that other people on your team are speaking to somebody you really wanted to meet, somebody that's coming from your territory that has an active project, but you're tied up with another customer or may not even be on the booth at the time if they didn't set a proper appointment. Even if they do set appointments, I mean, how many exhibitors realize that the appointment was for 9 o'clock and your customer shows up at 10:30 because they got hung up somewhere else? But the two biggest mistakes I see are when you're talking to a customer that's not in your territory and you know you're not the one that's following up, your notes have to be next level. Your lead capture form or however you're taking those contacts, you need to be filling in detail there that you might normally, put into your own head and could remember. But if somebody else has to read that contact 3 days from now that didn't actually meet that customer, you need to be as specific as you can. Hey, this is what they told me about the product. They even told me temperature and viscosity, and they said they needed this many a minute. So when I get that lead, then I have an idea what was said. You told me you had this other brand and you were having these problems. That's important information to know. So the more detail you can capture that helps me follow up on an educated level, that's really great. So that's the first mistake I see, that people don't capture that stuff in enough detail. And it goes into a bag or a box or electronic file, wherever that stuff is captured. Heck, and when we first started out, you had to write that stuff down. Now a lot of it is electronic lead capture and so forth. But at the end of the day, I know it's hard at the end of the day because everybody's out there. They want to entertain their customers or they're just anxious to get out of the booth. So if you don't do it at the end of every day, you need to do it in the hour or two before the show opens in the morning. You need your whole booth staff sitting around the conference table or whatever you can manage in your booth, and you're going through every lead and you're saying, hey, Matt, you talk to this guy. That's my territory. I don't understand what you wrote here. You said, two lanes, so many a minute. I don't know. Did you mean one machine or did you mean two lanes split in? And that's where, and Matt will remember if it's only the next morning. But if I have to call Matt the week after the show, after he's seen 400 people in 4 days, Matt's not going to remember what
No
he
way.
wrote down.
No way. And
So
worse, I might confuse meetings and give you wrong information that then makes.
absolutely. So
So
you go back to your calculation of what that lead actually cost you. That was thousands of bucks it cost us to get that lead. And all Matt wrote down was the name of the customer, his email address, and he was interested in a filling machine. Well,
right.
thanks a lot, Matt. That was the best you could come up with.
It's
So
sabotage. Yeah.
yeah, it makes it incredibly difficult or ineffective for you to do a good job with your follow-up if you didn't get any information or people don't even remember who they talked to.
If you were going to plant a saboteur in your team, in your booth, that's what they would do.
It's amazing.
So
And you
one
think
thing,
about it, a big company with an active territory, if you're in the Northeast or if you're in the West Coast, the number of leads that Matt's going to get could be hundreds. So you're now back at the office on the Monday after the show closed on Thursday or Friday. You're tired as it is from spending all that time and effort traveling. And now you've got all these leads. You've got to figure out which ones you're going to follow up first. Hopefully they're coded some way. You've already thought of that. And you start your follow-up, but you start looking through these scraps of paper or these files that have these ambiguous notes in them. It really makes it difficult.
and so we're going to talk in the webinar, we're going to talk about some ways to end cap exactly what you talked about. What do we do as soon as the doors close? What do we do when it opens in the morning so you don't lose that very important information and you prioritize this volume of leads that you have in terms of the ones that are really ready to buy that need your attention right away? I'd like to leave the audience with maybe one thought, which is if you were to sort of put one sentence on the wall of every booth in terms of please do this to be successful at the show, to take advantage of all the opportunity in the world can be sitting right in front of you. But if you don't do the right thing, they can't identify you, you can't identify them. So is there some guiding piece of advice you just write on the wall for every exhibitor?
Well, I mean, and we talked about it. I would say absolutely make sure you plan ahead and arrange as many meetings and appointments in advance as you can so you know that they're coming. I would say you've got to make sure you do that debrief every day, every evening or every morning following that day to make sure you understand what people have scribbled on that lead generation form. so you can understand what you need to talk to about in follow up. And then the last thing is make sure you've arranged for cover. If you have meetings scheduled and all of a sudden they're late and now you have to take another meeting, make sure somebody else is in the booth that knew a little bit about what was going on so that they can greet that prospect when they come in and you're tied up elsewhere.
I love it. It's really about, and they say, right, if you've read The Art of War or any of these books, it's, you win in the prep. So what we're going to do is we'll carry your ideas into the October webinar, which is going to give you that playbook for what do you prep at the beginning of the day and debrief, and what do you prep and debrief at the end of the day. Otherwise, you're losing valuable information. And as we both talked about here, you lose that. It doesn't stay in your mind. And at that point, you're losing valuable leads that need to be acted upon, but precisely. So, Glen, I really appreciate you taking the time to share some thoughts with our audience. And I look forward to seeing a lot of PMMI members on the October session where we'll share that playbook. Glen,
Excellent.
Thanks for being here today.
Appreciate it. Matt, thanks for having me. We appreciate your efforts.
Yep, likewise. Thank you, Glen.